The gunshot that saved Rosalie Dawson's life would forever be etched in her memory, just like the face of the man who fired it. It wasn't how she'd imagined starting her new life in Shafter, Texas, in the spring of 1875, but fate rarely consulted one's plans before rearranging them completely. Rosalie stepped off the dusty stagecoach, legs wobbly after 3 days of travel from St. Louis. Her auburn hair was pinned in a severe bun beneath her hat, and her once pristine traveling dress bore the marks of the grueling journey. Shafter sprawled before her, a collection of weathered buildings that seemed to wilt under the merciless Texas sun, nothing like the illustrations in the newspaper advertisement that had lured her west. Miss Dawson, a wiry man with small, darting eyes, approached. Alfred Brunswick. I wrote to you about the teaching position, she nodded, forcing a smile despite her exhaustion. Yes, Mr. Brunswick, I'm pleased to finally meet you. His gaze traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Pleasure's all mine. The schoolhouse ain't ready yet, but we've arranged lodging for you at Mrs. Wilkerson's boarding house. School starts in 2 weeks. As Brunswick led her down the main street, Rosalie took in her surroundings. Shafter was rougher than she'd anticipated, men stumbling from saloons despite the early hour, dust coating everything, the distinct lack of the genteel community promised in the advertisement. But she was determined to make this work. After her father's death and the subsequent discovery of his gambling debts, this teaching position was her only chance at independence. Miss Dawson will be staying with you, Mrs. Wilkerson, Brunswick announced when they reached a 2-story clapboard house at the edge of town. The older woman wiped flour-covered hands on her apron and gave Rosalie a genuine smile, the first she'd seen since arriving. Welcome to Shafter, dear. Come in, come in. You must be exhausted. The boarding house was clean, if sparse, and Rosalie's room on the 2nd floor overlooked a small garden. After washing the travel grime from her face and changing into a fresh dress, she ventured downstairs where Mrs. Wilkerson was preparing supper. The school committee is quite pleased to have found a qualified teacher, the woman said, handing Rosalie a cup of tea. Our last one left rather suddenly. May I ask why? Mrs. Wilkerson's smile tightened. Oh well, Shafter can be challenging for some folks. Not everyone is cut out for frontier life. Before Rosalie could press further, the front door banged open and a young woman with golden curls burst in. Mama, have you heard? The Gatlin brothers are back in town, Mrs. Wilkerson paled. Mary, we have company. This is Miss Dawson, our new schoolteacher. Mary barely acknowledged Rosalie. They were seen at the Broken Spoke not an hour ago. Sheriff Daniels is gathering men. Gatlin brothers? Rosalie asked. Mrs. Wilkerson sighed. Outlaws. They've terrorized this region for years. They robbed the bank last autumn, Mary added with inappropriate excitement. Shot Mr. Peters right between the eyes. Mary, that's quite enough. Mrs. Wilkerson turned to Rosalie. I apologize for alarming you. These incidents are rare. But that night, as Rosalie lay in her narrow bed listening to unfamiliar sounds, coyotes in the distance, the occasional shout from the saloon, she wondered what she'd gotten herself into. The next morning, Rosalie decided to explore Shafter. The town consisted of one main street with various establishments lining both sides, a general store, 2 saloons, a small bank, a barber shop that also offered dental services, advertised by a gruesome painting of a molar, and various other businesses. At the far end stood the half-constructed schoolhouse. Curious, she made her way toward it. The building was larger than she expected, with tall windows to let in natural light. As she peered through the unfinished doorway, the sound of hammering filled the air. It'll be ready in time, miss, don't you worry. Rosalie turned to find a man emerging from behind the building, tools in hand. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by several days' worth of beard. A weathered cowboy hat sat atop dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. What caught her attention, though, were his eyes, an intense blue that seemed to see right through her. I hope so, she replied, remembering her manners. I'm Rosalie Dawson, the new teacher, Flynn Garrett. He nodded without offering his hand, which was covered in sawdust anyway. Figured as much. Not many unfamiliar faces in Shafter, especially not ones dressed like they just stepped out of an Eastern catalog. She glanced down at her dress, suddenly self-conscious. Is there something wrong with how I'm dressed? A hint of amusement crossed his face. Not at all. Just might want to consider something more practical if you're planning to stay. That fancy fabric won't last a month out here. Rosalie bristled. I'll manage my wardrobe just fine, Mr. Garrett. He shrugged. Suit yourself. He turned back to his work, dismissing her. Are you the carpenter? She asked, not ready to end the conversation despite her annoyance. Flynn paused. Sometimes I ranch, mostly just helping with this because we need a school. He glanced at her over his shoulder. You planning to stick around longer than the last teacher? Why did the last teacher leave? She asked directly, his expression darkened. Decided teaching wasn't for her after all. Some folks come west thinking it'll be an adventure, then discover they can't handle the reality. There was an edge to his voice that suggested he was judging her, finding her lacking before she'd even begun. Rosalie straightened her spine. I assure you, Mr. Garrett, I'm perfectly capable of handling whatever Shafter has to offer. Flynn studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Hope you're right, Miss Dawson. He tipped his hat slightly. For the children's sake. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. You might want to avoid walking alone until you know the town better. Not everyone here is welcoming to strangers. I appreciate your concern, but I can take care of myself. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Never said you couldn't, just offered some advice. The week passed slowly as Rosalie prepared for her teaching duties. She visited the incomplete schoolhouse daily, planning her curriculum and arranging for supplies. She met some of her future pupils and their parents when they came to town, most regarding her with cautious curiosity. Brunswick proved to be an unsettling presence, appearing wherever she went, watching her with those small eyes. When she inquired about school board meetings or her salary, he deflected with vague assurances. Flynn Garrett remained an enigma. Sometimes he'd be working at the schoolhouse. Other times she'd glimpse him riding through town or emerging from the mercantile. He rarely acknowledged her beyond a nod, but she often felt his gaze following her. On Sunday, Rosalie attended church services with Mrs. Wilkerson, where she was formally introduced to the community. Afterward, standing beneath the shade of a large oak tree, she finally met Sheriff Daniels, a stout man with a graying mustache who seemed perpetually exhausted. The Gatlins have moved on, he told Mrs. Wilkerson. At least for now. Thank the Lord for small mercies, Mrs. Wilkerson replied. The conversation shifted to town matters, and Rosalie found herself drifting away from the group. She spotted Flynn standing alone by the church steps, watching the crowd with that same intense gaze. Mr. Garrett, she said, approaching him. The schoolhouse is coming along nicely, he nodded. Should be finished by Wednesday. I wanted to thank you for your work. Flynn looked surprised at her gratitude. Just doing what needs doing. Will your children be attending? She asked, realizing she knew nothing about his personal life. A shadow crossed his face. Don't have any. Oh, I'm sorry, I just assumed. No need to apologize. His tone was clipped. You settling in all right? The abrupt change of subject caught her off guard. Yes, though I must admit, Shafter isn't quite what I expected. Few things in life are. His gaze moved past her to where Brunswick was watching them. Best be careful who you trust around here, Miss Dawson. Before she could ask what he meant, Mary Wilkerson hurried over. Miss Dawson. Mama's looking for you. We're having the Hendersons over for Sunday dinner and she wants to introduce you. As Rosalie excused herself, she glanced back to see Flynn and Brunswick exchanging cold looks. That night, unable to sleep, Rosalie decided to write in her journal. She just lit the lamp when she heard raised voices from the street below. Peering through her window, she saw two men arguing outside the saloon across the way. One appeared to be Brunswick, the other's face was hidden in shadow. As their argument intensified, Brunswick suddenly shoved the other man. A flash of moonlight revealed the second man's face, Flynn. In one fluid motion, Flynn grabbed Brunswick by the collar and slammed him against the saloon wall. Words were exchanged that Rosalie couldn't hear. Then Flynn released Brunswick with obvious disgust and strode away. Brunswick stood there for a moment, straightening his clothes before heading in the direction of the saloon. Just before entering, he looked up directly at Rosalie's window. She stepped back quickly, heart pounding, but not before their eyes met. The next morning at breakfast, Mrs. Wilkerson seemed troubled. "Miss Dawson, I'd advise caution around Mr. Brunswick. He's been known to take liberties with young women in vulnerable positions." Rosalie set down her fork. "Has he harmed someone?" "Nothing that could be proven," Mrs. Wilkerson said carefully. "But there have been rumors about the previous teacher." Before Rosalie could inquire further, Mary burst in. "The Gatlin brothers are back. They robbed a stagecoach outside of Pico's." "Mary, please," her mother admonished. "It's true. And they're saying they might be headed this way again." Rosalie's appetite vanished. "Perhaps I should postpone the start of school." Mrs. Wilkerson shook her head firmly. "We can't let fear rule our lives out here. The children need their education." That afternoon, as Rosalie was returning from the mercantile with supplies for her classroom, Brunswick intercepted her. "Miss Dawson," he smiled, revealing yellowed teeth. "Allow me to carry those for you. I'm quite capable, thank you." He stepped closer. "I saw you watching from your window last night." Rosalie's pulse quickened. "I heard a disturbance. It would be difficult not to notice." "Garrett's a troublemaker," Brunswick said, his voice low. "Best keep your distance from him if you want to succeed here." "I don't believe I asked for your advice on my associations, Mr. Brunswick." His smile vanished. "I'm chairman of the school board, Miss Dawson. Your employment depends on my good opinion." Before Rosalie could respond, a deep voice cut in. "Everything all right here?" Flynn stood a few feet away, his stance casual but his eyes alert. Brunswick's expression soured. "Just having a word with our teacher. Nothing that concerns you, Garrett." "Miss Dawson?" Flynn's gaze shifted to her, silently asking if she needed help. "I was just returning to the boarding house," she said, grateful for his interruption. "I'll walk with you," Flynn said, not a question but a statement. Brunswick's face reddened, but he stepped aside. "Remember what I said, Miss Dawson." As they walked away, Rosalie felt Brunswick's eyes boring into her back. "Man's a snake," Flynn said once they were out of earshot. "He implied my position is contingent on his approval," Rosalie replied, anger replacing her earlier discomfort. "That's how he operates. Controls folks through their livelihoods." "What were you arguing about last night?" she asked directly. Flynn looked surprised. "You saw that?" "My window overlooks the street." He was quiet for several steps. "Brunswick's been skimming money meant for the school, using it to pay off gambling debts." Rosalie stopped walking. "Are you certain?" "Yes." His jaw tightened. "But he's got connections with the county judge, makes him untouchable. So the school board just allows this." "Most don't know. Those who suspect are too afraid of losing their businesses." Flynn's expression darkened. "Brunswick's the reason the last teacher left. He made advances. When she threatened to expose him, he spread rumors about her virtue. She was gone within a week." Rosalie felt cold despite the warm afternoon. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you deserve to know what you're dealing with." His eyes met hers. "And because you strike me as someone who might stand her ground instead of running." They'd reached the boarding house. Rosalie paused at the gate. "Thank you for walking with me." "And for the warning," Flynn nodded. "Schoolhouse will be ready tomorrow. I've added locks to the doors and windows." "Is that necessary in Shafter?" "Yes." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss Dawson." That night Rosalie barely slept, Brunswick's threats and Flynn's warnings circling in her mind. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She would not be intimidated, nor would she abandon the children who needed education. She would simply need to be vigilant and find allies within the community. The schoolhouse was indeed completed the next day. Rosalie spent hours arranging the room, positioning desks, unpacking books, and writing lessons on the new blackboard. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't notice Flynn standing in the doorway until he spoke. "Looks good." She jumped slightly. "You startled me. Sorry." He entered, removing his hat. "Wanted to make sure everything was to your liking before the children arrive." "It's perfect, thank you." She gestured around the room. "You've created a wonderful space for learning." Something close to pride crossed his face as he surveyed the schoolhouse. "My pa never learned to read, always said it was his biggest regret." "Is he still living?" Flynn shook his head. "Died when I was 15, cattle drive accident, I'm sorry, long time ago." He walked to one of the windows, checking the latch. "These all lock from the inside." "Keep them secured when you're here alone." His concern touched her. "Mr. Garrett, why did you really help build this school? You don't have children of your own, and from what I gather, you're not particularly involved in town affairs." Flynn was quiet for a moment. "Everyone deserves a chance at something better. Education provides that." He met her gaze. "What about you? Why teach in a place like Shafter when someone with your education could find a position in civilization?" It was her turn to look away. "My father died last year, left nothing but debts. I needed to start fresh somewhere." "I'm sorry for your loss." His voice held genuine sympathy. "Still, there must have been safer options." "The advertisement painted quite a different picture of Shafter," she admitted. "By the time I realized the truth, I'd already spent most of my savings getting here." Flynn's expression hardened. "Let me guess, Brunswick's advertisement?" When she nodded, he cursed under his breath. "He's done this before. Lures qualified teachers with false promises, then tries to control them once they arrive." "Well, he won't control me," Rosalie said firmly. Flynn studied her face. "No, I don't believe he will." There was something like admiration in his voice. "Still, be careful. Man like that is dangerous when crossed." As he turned to leave, Rosalie called after him. "Will I see you at the school opening tomorrow?" "I'll be around," he promised. The first day of school dawned bright and clear. Rosalie wore her finest teaching dress and arrived early to prepare. By 8 o'clock, nearly 20 children of varying ages had gathered, eyeing her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. "Good morning," she greeted them. "I'm Miss Dawson, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher." A girl of about 12 raised her hand. "Are you going to leave like Miss Cooper did?" The blunt question created an uncomfortable silence. "I have no intention of leaving," Rosalie answered honestly. "I came to Shafter to teach, and that's exactly what I plan to do." This seemed to satisfy the children, and the day proceeded better than she'd hoped. By afternoon, she'd assessed their varying levels of education and begun grouping them accordingly. Some of the older boys were resistant at first, but her firm, fair approach gradually won them over. As the children filed out at day's end, Rosalie noticed Flynn leaning against a tree across the yard, watching. When the last child left, he approached. "Survived your first day," he observed. "It went well, actually. They're bright children. They're lucky to have you." The sincerity in his voice warmed her. "Need an escort back to town." They walked side by side, Rosalie sharing stories from the day. Flynn listened attentively, occasionally asking questions about her teaching methods. It felt comfortable, natural even, until they rounded a bend and encountered Brunswick with 2 other men. "Miss Dawson." Brunswick's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I trust your first day went smoothly." "Very well, thank you." "I see you continue to keep questionable company." His gaze slid to Flynn. Flynn's posture shifted subtly, becoming more alert. "Miss Dawson was just telling me about her successful first day. Seems the children are responding well to proper education." The emphasis on proper wasn't lost on Brunswick, whose face darkened. "The school board will be evaluating your performance next week, Miss Dawson. We have certain standards that must be maintained." "I look forward to demonstrating my teaching abilities," she replied evenly. Brunswick's companions shifted uncomfortably. "We should get going, Alfred," one muttered. "Of course." Brunswick tipped his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Good day, Miss Dawson, Garrett." As they continued toward town, Rosalie sensed Flynn's tension. "He can't possibly find fault with my teaching." The children learned more today than they had in months, according to what they told me. It's not about your teaching, Flynn said grimly. It's about control. If you don't bend to his will, he'll find a reason to dismiss you. The realization made her falter. Then what am I to do? Flynn stopped walking, turning to face her. Build allies, the parents of your students. Show them what their children are learning. Once the community values you, Brunswick's influence will wane. Will it be enough? It has to be. Flynn's gaze was intense. Unless you're considering leaving. I'm not running away, she said firmly. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. Good. Over the next 2 weeks, Rosalie threw herself into teaching with renewed determination. She visited her students' homes, invited parents to observe classes, and organized a recitation evening where the children demonstrated their progress. Word spread about the positive changes at the schoolhouse, and enrollment increased. Flynn remained a constant, if somewhat distant, presence. She'd see him around town or occasionally find him waiting to walk her home after school. They developed a cautious friendship, though she sensed he was holding something back. The school board evaluation came and went. Brunswick could find no legitimate fault with her teaching, but his thinly veiled hostility persisted. He began spreading rumors that she was too strict, that she favored certain children, that her teaching methods were suspiciously progressive. One evening, as Rosalie was locking up the schoolhouse, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning quickly, she found Brunswick standing too close for comfort. Working late again, Miss Dawson? His breath smelled of whiskey. Such dedication. I was preparing for tomorrow's lessons, she said, taking a step back. He followed. You've been quite the topic of conversation lately. Some folks wonder why a refined lady like yourself would choose Shafter. I believe education is important everywhere. Is that the only reason? He moved closer. Or perhaps you're running from something, a scandal, perhaps, a broken heart. My past is none of your concern, Mr. Brunswick. She tried to step around him, but he blocked her path. Everything in this town is my concern. His hand shot out, grabbing her arm, especially when it involves someone as intriguing as yourself. Remove your hand, sir. Her voice remained steady despite her racing heart. Or what? His grip tightened. You'll run to Garrett. I've seen how you look at him. But what do you really know about the man? Did you know he killed 2 men in Laredo, or that he spent time in Huntsville State Prison? Shock must have registered on her face because Brunswick smiled triumphantly. Not such a noble protector after all, is he? Let her go, Brunswick. The voice came from behind them. Flynn stood at the edge of the schoolyard, his expression murderous. Brunswick released her arm but didn't step back. We're just having a friendly conversation. Didn't look friendly from where I'm standing. Flynn's hand hovered near his hip, where Rosalie noticed a holstered revolver for the first time. Miss Dawson and I were discussing your colorful past, Brunswick said with a sneer. She seemed quite interested. Flynn's gaze shifted to Rosalie, something vulnerable briefly crossing his face before his expression hardened again. Miss Dawson, would you like me to escort you back to town? Yes, thank you. She moved away from Brunswick, who made no attempt to stop her now. This isn't over, Brunswick called after them. The school board meeting tomorrow will be quite revealing. They walked in tense silence until they were well away from the schoolhouse. Are you all right? Flynn finally asked. Did he hurt you? No, I'm fine. She rubbed her arm where Brunswick's fingers had dug in. Is it true, what he said about you? Flynn's jaw tightened. Parts of it. Which parts? He stopped walking, turning to face her with resigned eyes. I killed 2 men in Laredo. Self-defense, they were trying to rob the cattle payroll I was guarding. Spent 18 months in Huntsville before the true facts came to light and the governor pardoned me. Rosalie absorbed this information. Why didn't you tell me? It's not something I advertise. His voice was bitter. Most people hear prison and stop listening to anything else. I'm not most people, he studied her face. No, you're not. After a moment, he added, Brunswick will use this against you tomorrow, claim you're setting a bad example for the children by associating with me. Let him try. Determination replaced her earlier fear. I won't be intimidated, and I won't let him dictate who I can befriend. Something softened in Flynn's expression. You deserve better than this town, Rosalie, better than having to fight just to do your job, better than. He gestured to himself. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it affected her more than she expected. You're wrong, she said quietly. About yourself, at least. You've been nothing but honorable since I arrived. You don't know me, he insisted. I know enough. The school board meeting the next evening was held in the church. Nearly the entire town attended, an unusual occurrence that spoke to Brunswick's campaign against her. Rosalie sat with quiet dignity in the front pew, while Brunswick and the other board members faced the congregation from behind a table. Brunswick spoke first, his voice dripping with false concern. We're here to discuss some troubling developments regarding our schoolteacher. For the next 20 minutes, he outlined his complaints: her radical teaching methods, her inappropriate friendships, her questionable character. Some of the allegations were so ridiculous that murmurs of disbelief rippled through the crowd. When he finished, he turned to Rosalie with a triumphant smile. Miss Dawson, do you have anything to say in your defense? Rosalie stood, smoothing her skirts as she approached the table. Yes, Mr. Brunswick, I do. She turned to face the townspeople. Since arriving in Shafter, I have dedicated myself to providing the best education possible for your children. In just a few weeks, they've made remarkable progress. They're reading better, calculating more accurately, and developing a genuine love of learning. Nods of agreement from parents encouraged her to continue. Mr. Brunswick suggests my methods are too progressive. I say they are effective. He questions my character because I've befriended Mr. Garrett, a man who has shown nothing but kindness and honor during my time here. She drew a deep breath. But the real issue, I believe, is not my teaching or my associations. It's that I've refused to be controlled. I've refused to ignore the fact that funds allocated for school supplies have mysteriously disappeared. I've refused to pretend I don't notice when the chairman of our school board arrives at meetings smelling of whiskey and making inappropriate comments. Gasps and whispers erupted. Brunswick's face reddened with fury. How dare you make such accusations? He sputtered. I dare because they're true, Rosalie replied steadily, and I believe others here know it as well. From the back of the church, a woman stood. My Thomas says Miss Dawson is the best teacher he's ever had. He's reading whole books now, something he couldn't do before. Another voice joined in. My girls have learned more in 3 weeks with Miss Dawson than they did all last year. To Rosalie's surprise, Sheriff Daniels rose next. I've been looking into some financial discrepancies at Brunswick's request. Interesting thing is, the discrepancies all lead back to him. Money meant for the school ending up paying his tabs at the saloon and the gambling hall in El Paso. The church erupted in angry voices. Brunswick's face went from red to white. This is slander, he shouted. I'll have you all, you'll do nothing, interrupted a new voice. Flynn stood by the church door, his presence commanding immediate attention. Except perhaps explain the stolen payroll money from the Silver Creek mine that was found in your desk this afternoon. Sheriff Daniels nodded grimly. That's right. While Brunswick was busy organizing this meeting, my deputy and I executed a search warrant. Found nearly $500 that went missing during last month's robbery, the one Brunswick was so quick to blame on the Gatlin gang. The revelation stunned the room into silence. Then chaos erupted as Brunswick lunged across the table, grabbing for the sheriff's gun. In the confusion, he wrested it free and pointed it wildly around the room before settling on Rosalie. This is your fault, he snarled, advancing toward her. You and that prison trash you're so fond of. Everything happened at once. People screamed and ducked for cover. The sheriff shouted for Brunswick to drop the weapon, and Flynn moved with stunning speed, placing himself between Rosalie and the gun. Put it down, Alfred, Flynn said, his voice deadly calm. It's over. Brunswick's hand trembled. Get out of my way, Garrett. No, for one terrible moment, Rosalie thought Brunswick would shoot. Then the church doors burst open again, distracting him. 3 deputies rushed in, guns drawn, Brunswick's shoulders slumped in defeat. As the sheriff moved to disarm him, he suddenly raised the gun again, not toward Rosalie this time, but toward Flynn. The shot that rang out wasn't from Brunswick's gun. The school board chairman crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across his chest. Behind him stood Mrs. Wilkerson, holding a small derringer, her face pale but determined. "He was going to kill Mr. Garrett," she said simply. "I couldn't let that happen." The aftermath of that evening was chaotic. Brunswick survived but would face trial once he recovered. The stolen money was returned, and a temporary school board was established. Through it all, Flynn remained by Rosalie's side, a steady presence amid the turmoil. A week later, when life had begun returning to normal, he came to the schoolhouse after classes ended. He looked different, somehow clean-shaven, wearing a new shirt, his dark hair neatly trimmed. "I wanted to make sure you were all right," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually." She smiled. "The new school board approved all my supply requests and increased my salary." "Good, that's good." He seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "Listen, Rosalie, I've been thinking about what I said that night, about you deserving better." Her heart quickened. "Yes, I still believe it." He took a step closer. "You deserve someone educated, someone without my past, someone who can offer you more than a life in a rough town like this." "Flynn," he held up a hand, "but I'm selfish enough to be here anyway, to tell you that these past weeks, getting to know you, protecting you, they've meant something to me, something I didn't expect to feel again." Rosalie moved toward him, closing the distance between them. "Do I get any say in what I deserve?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "I reckon you've earned that right. Good." She reached for his hand, surprising both of them with her boldness. "Because I don't want better, Flynn Garrett. I've seen enough of the world to know that better often means colder, more restrictive, less honest." His eyes never left hers. "You deserve better," he repeated, but softer this time. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. "Then teach me worse," she whispered. "I'll still choose you." For a moment he seemed frozen in disbelief, then his hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle despite the calluses on his fingers. "Are you sure?" In answer, Rosalie rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as Flynn's arm wrapped around her waist, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I've wanted to do that since the day you told Brunswick you wouldn't be intimidated," he confessed. Rosalie laughed softly. "I've wanted you to do that since you checked my window locks and told me to be careful." "We'll have to be discreet," he warned. The school board can mind their own business," she interrupted. "I'm not hiding how I feel about you, Flynn." His smile transformed his face. "And how exactly do you feel, Miss Dawson?" "Like I've found exactly where I'm meant to be." Summer yielded to fall, and fall to winter. Rosalie's teaching position became permanent, her methods bringing noticeable improvements to the children's education. Flynn's reputation in town changed as well, no longer the solitary ex-convict, but a respected rancher and the schoolteacher's suitor. They courted properly, with Flynn calling at the boarding house and escorting Rosalie to social events. Mrs. Wilkerson, who had become something of a surrogate mother to Rosalie, approved wholeheartedly of the match. "He looks at you like you hung the moon," she told Rosalie one evening as they prepared dinner. "Never thought I'd see Flynn Garrett so smitten." Rosalie blushed. "He's a good man." "One of the best," Mrs. Wilkerson agreed, though he'd be the last to admit it. Brunswick's trial came and went. He was convicted of embezzlement and attempted murder, sentenced to 20 years in the state penitentiary. The Gatlin gang was eventually captured near the Mexico border, bringing a measure of peace to the region. On Christmas Eve, Flynn invited Rosalie for a ride to see his ranch. They bundled up against the Texas winter, which was mild compared to the Missouri winters she was accustomed to, and set out in his wagon. Flynn's property lay about 5 miles outside of Shafter, several hundred acres of rolling grassland, with a modest but well-built house nestled against a stand of live oak trees. A small creek wound through the property, and cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. "It's beautiful," Rosalie said as Flynn helped her down from the wagon. "It's not much compared to what you probably had back east," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "It's perfect." She turned in a slow circle, taking in the landscape. Absolutely perfect. Flynn led her to the house, suddenly seeming nervous again. "I've been working on it, adding a few things." The interior was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and a large stone fireplace. But what caught Rosalie's attention was the small room off the main living area. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined two walls with a comfortable reading chair positioned near the window. "You built a library," she whispered, deeply touched. Flynn nodded. "Figured any wife of mine would need a proper place for her books." The casual reference to wife made her heart skip. "Flynn," he took her hands in his. "I'm not good with fancy words, Rosalie. I can't quote poetry or speak French or any of those things educated men can do." His blue eyes held hers intently. "But I know what I feel. I love you, more than I thought possible. And if you'll have me, I want to make a life with you right here." Tears blurred her vision. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "Yes." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. Inside was a ring with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was my mother's. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Is that a yes?" His voice was uncertain. Rosalie threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, of course yes." Their kiss was tender at first, then grew more passionate. Flynn's arms tightened around her waist, lifting her slightly. When they finally broke apart, both were flushed and breathless. "I love you, Flynn Garrett," Rosalie said, resting her forehead against his. "I have for months now." His smile was radiant. "Even knowing what I am, my past, your past is part of what made you the man I love." She touched his face gently. "The man who protected me, who built a school for children he doesn't have, who checks window locks and worries about strangers in a town that barely accepted him." Flynn's eyes darkened with emotion. "I don't deserve you." "There you go again," she teased, "telling me what I deserve." He laughed softly. "Stubborn woman. You wouldn't have me any other way." They were married on New Year's Day, 1876, in the small church where Brunswick had once tried to ruin them both. The whole town attended, even those who had once whispered about Flynn's past or questioned Rosalie's place in Shafter. Mrs. Wilkerson wept openly as Rosalie walked down the aisle in a cream-colored dress that the older woman had helped sew. Flynn waited at the altar, looking uncomfortable in his new suit but gazing at Rosalie with such naked adoration that several women sighed audibly. "Do you, Flynn James Garrett, take Rosalie Catherine Dawson to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the minister asked. Flynn's voice was clear and steady. "I do." "And do you, Rosalie Catherine Dawson, take Flynn James Garrett to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Rosalie smiled up at the man who had changed her life in so many ways. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The minister beamed. "You may kiss your bride." Flynn's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, and cheers erupted throughout the church. As they walked back down the aisle, Rosalie caught sight of her students grinning widely and Mrs. Wilkerson dabbing at her eyes. "Happy," Flynn murmured as they stepped into the winter sunshine. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. The reception was held at the newly built town hall, with tables groaning under the weight of food contributed by nearly every household in Shafter. There was music and dancing, laughter and a few happy tears. Flynn, who admitted to having 2 left feet, nevertheless swept Rosalie around the floor for their first dance as husband and wife. Later, as the celebration continued around them, they slipped outside for a moment of quiet. "Thank you," Flynn said, drawing her close against the January chill. "For what? For choosing me. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." She leaned into his embrace. "Thank you for teaching me that sometimes what looks like worse on the surface is actually exactly what you need." They returned to the party hand in hand, surrounded by the community that had become their extended family. As midnight approached, Flynn whispered in her ear, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Garrett, home." The word had never sounded sweeter. Spring brought new beginnings to Shafter. The town was growing, with a new hotel under construction and talk of the railroad possibly extending a line through within the next few years. Rosalie continued teaching, though she now rode to and from school with Flynn when weather permitted. Their life together settled into a rhythm, mornings spent with chores and preparation, days with Rosalie at the schoolhouse and Flynn tending to his ranch, evenings together in their home. They read by the fire, Flynn's reading skills improving under Rosalie's patient tutelage. They talked about everything and nothing. They loved each other with an intensity that only seemed to grow with time. In late April, Rosalie made a discovery that would change their lives once more. She waited until Flynn returned from a 3-day cattle drive to share her news. He found her in the garden behind their house, planting herbs in the rich spring soil. The sight of her hair loosely braided, sleeves rolled up, dirt smudging her cheek made his heart swell with love. "There's my beautiful wife," he called, dismounting from his horse. Rosalie turned, her face lighting up. She rose quickly and ran to him, throwing herself into his arms with such enthusiasm that he staggered back a step, laughing. "I missed you too," he said, kissing her soundly. "I have something to tell you," she said when they broke apart, her eyes shining with excitement. Flynn raised an eyebrow. "Good news, I hope, the best." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby." Flynn froze, his eyes widening. "A baby." "You're sure?" she nodded. "Dr. Matthews confirmed it yesterday. Late October, he thinks." For a moment, Flynn said nothing, and Rosalie felt a flicker of uncertainty. Then he let out a whoop of joy, lifting her off her feet and spinning her in a circle before carefully setting her down again. "A baby," he repeated, his voice filled with wonder. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction had made the answer obvious. He cradled her face in his hands. "Rosalie Garrett, you've given me more happiness than I ever thought possible, and now this." His voice broke with emotion. "I love you so much." "I love you too." She leaned into his touch. "I can't wait to meet our child." Flynn knelt before her, pressing a gentle kiss to her stomach. "Hello in there, little one," he whispered. "Your mama and papa can't wait to meet you either." News of the pregnancy spread quickly through Shafter. Mrs. Wilkerson immediately began knitting baby clothes, and the women of the town planned a baby shower for late summer. Flynn became even more protective of Rosalie, insisting she rest more and hiring a young woman from town to help with household chores. "I'm pregnant, not ill," Rosalie reminded him repeatedly, though she secretly cherished his concern. "Just looking out for my family," he would reply, the word family spoken with reverent joy. Summer arrived with scorching heat. Rosalie concluded the school year and reluctantly agreed to take the fall term off to focus on the baby's arrival. Her replacement was a young man from Austin, competent but lacking her natural gift for teaching. "The children miss you," he told her when he came for guidance on lesson plans. "They ask about you every day." "I miss them too," Rosalie admitted, "but I'll be back after Christmas." As her body changed with the advancing pregnancy, Rosalie sometimes caught Flynn watching her with an expression of awe. One night, as they lay in bed with his hand resting on her growing belly, he confessed his fears. "What if I'm not a good father? I never had much of an example." Rosalie turned to face him in the moonlight streaming through their window. "Flynn Garrett, you will be an amazing father. You're kind, patient, protective, everything a child needs." "I don't know the first thing about babies," he worried. "Neither do I," she laughed softly. "We'll learn together." Their child chose a stormy night in late October to make his entrance into the world. The labor was long and difficult, with Flynn pacing outside their bedroom while Mrs. Wilkerson and the midwife attended to Rosalie. Each cry of pain was like a physical blow to him, and several times he nearly burst into the room, stopped only by Sheriff Daniels, who had come to keep him company. "Women are stronger than we'll ever be," the older man assured him. "She'll pull through." Finally, as dawn broke, A new cry joined Rosalie's the lusty wail of a newborn. Flynn's head snapped up just as the bedroom door opened and Mrs. Wilkerson appeared, her face tired but joyful. "Congratulations, Mr. Garrett," she said. "You have a son." Flynn entered the bedroom on shaky legs. Rosalie lay propped against pillows, her face pale and exhausted but radiant with happiness. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Flynn approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid he might somehow break this perfect moment. When Rosalie pulled back the blanket to reveal a small, red face topped with a shock of dark hair, he felt his heart expand in his chest. "He's perfect," he breathed, carefully sitting on the edge of the bed. "Just like his mother," Rosalie smiled. "Would you like to hold him?" With trembling hands, Flynn took his son into his arms for the first time. The baby's eyes opened briefly blue, like his own, then closed again as he nestled against his father's chest. "Hello, son," Flynn whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I'm your pa." Rosalie watched them together, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "What shall we call him?" They had discussed names but hadn't settled on one. Now, looking down at his son's face, Flynn knew. "James," he said. "After my father, James Thomas Garrett." "James Thomas Garrett," Rosalie repeated. "It's perfect." Flynn leaned down to kiss her gently. "Thank you for him, for us, for everything." "No regrets?" she asked softly. "About choosing the schoolteacher who brought trouble to your door," he smiled, the love in his eyes unmistakable. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." Little James thrived, growing strong and healthy through his first winter. He had his father's dark hair and blue eyes, but his mother's curious nature and determined spirit. Flynn took to fatherhood with surprising ease, never hesitating to change diapers or walk the floor with a fussy baby. "Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Daniels remarked after watching Flynn gently rock James to sleep during a visit. The man who once took on 3 outlaws single-handed, brought to his knees by 8 pounds of baby. Flynn grinned, unashamed. "Best surrender I ever made." When James was 6 months old, Rosalie returned to teaching, bringing him with her. The students adored their teacher's baby, taking turns holding him during breaks and competing to make him smile. Flynn would often arrive early to collect them, sitting in the back of the classroom watching his wife teach with pride evident in every line of his body. Life wasn't always easy. There were difficult seasons, drought that threatened the ranch, illness that swept through town and briefly touched their household, occasional troublemakers who passed through Shafter looking to cause problems. But through it all, Flynn and Rosalie faced each challenge together, their love only deepening with each obstacle overcome. When James was 2, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Marie, named after both their mothers. Where James was boisterous and adventurous, Elizabeth was thoughtful and observant, with her mother's auburn hair and her father's striking blue eyes. 2 perfect children, Flynn marveled one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, James playing with wooden blocks at their feet while Elizabeth nursed at Rosalie's breast. "Perfect because they're ours," Rosalie agreed, leaning against his shoulder. Flynn's arm tightened around her. "Do you ever regret it? Coming to Shafter, marrying an ex-convict turned rancher instead of some educated Easterner?" It was a question he rarely asked anymore, but occasionally his old insecurities surfaced. Rosalie always had the same answer. "Never." Not for a single moment. She looked up at him, love shining in her eyes. "You once told me I deserved better. And you said, then teach me worse, I'll still choose you," she finished. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. I'd choose you again and again, Flynn Garrett." He leaned down to kiss her, still marveling that this remarkable woman had chosen him, loved him, given him a family he'd never dreamed possible. "I love you, Rosalie Garrett," he whispered against her lips. "Until the day I die and beyond, and I love you," she smiled. "My cowboy, my husband. My heart." As the sun disappeared behind the Texas horizon, casting long shadows across their land, they sat together in contented silence, surrounded by the family they had created and the love that had transformed them both. 10 years after Rosalie first stepped off the stagecoach in Shafter, the town celebrated its centennial. Now a thriving community with a railway station, 3 hotels, and a proper school building with 3 classrooms, Shafter barely resembled the rough frontier town she'd encountered. The Garrett family had grown as well. James, now 9, was the spitting image of his father, with the same quiet strength and protective nature. Elizabeth, 7, had inherited her mother's intelligence and love of books. They had been joined by Robert, 5, and baby Catherine, just learning to walk. The centennial celebration included a parade down Main Street, a picnic in the town square, and dancing under the stars. As twilight descended, Flynn found Rosalie watching their children play with the other town children. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Garrett?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. She leaned into him. "I was just thinking about that first day in Shafter, how terrified I was." "How different everything turned out from what I expected," Flynn chuckled. "I remember thinking you wouldn't last a month, and now look at us." She gestured to their children. 4 children, a prosperous ranch, and I'm the school principal. "Don't forget the most handsome husband in Texas," Flynn added with a wink. Rosalie laughed, the sound still making his heart skip even after all these years. "How could I possibly forget that?" From across the square, James waved to them. "Pa, they're about to start the shooting contest." "You promised to enter, duty calls," Flynn said, pressing a quick kiss to Rosalie's temple. "Go show them how it's done," she encouraged. "We'll be cheering for you." As Flynn joined the other contestants, Sheriff Daniels, now gray-haired and considering retirement, stepped up beside Rosalie. "You know, when you first came to Shafter, I gave it 6 weeks before you'd be on the next stage out," he admitted. "Never been so happy to be wrong." Rosalie smiled. "I nearly did leave after that confrontation with Brunswick. What changed your mind?" Her gaze found Flynn, who was showing James how to hold a target properly. "Someone once told me I deserved better than Shafter, better than him." Her smile deepened. "But sometimes what looks like worse on the surface turns out to be exactly what you need." The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. "Flynn Garrett was the most closed-off man I'd ever met before you arrived. Now look at him surrounded by family, respected by the whole town. You changed him, Rosalie." "We changed each other," she corrected gently. As night fell and lanterns illuminated the square, Flynn returned to claim his prize for the shooting contest, a silver belt buckle he immediately presented to James, who beamed with pride. Then he swept Rosalie into his arms for a dance beneath the stars. "Happy?" he asked, the same question he'd asked on their wedding day. She gazed up at the man who had become her partner, protector, lover, and friend. The man who had taught her that love wasn't about deserving better or worse, but about choosing each other every day through all of life's challenges. "Completely," she answered, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "Now and always." Around them, Shafter continued its celebration, a town transformed just as they had been. And as the music played and their children laughed nearby, Flynn and Rosalie danced together under the vast Texas sky, grateful for that moment years ago when a cowboy said, "You deserve better," and she answered, "Then teach me worse, I'll still choose you."